Agile isn't enough. The point of this talk is if you have gotten to the place where you think you're Agile and you've been doing the same thing for 12 months, for 2 years, even for 6 months, for 2 months, I would argue that maybe you're not. Maybe you should question that. If you're doing everything that's in the white book, which I think is the extreme programming book, or everything in the Scrum, one of the Scrum books, that's not enough. If that's what you're doing, that's where you stopped, then you're missing something. Probably a lot of you get that already, that's why you're here. But the point of this talk is to be a taster of other things out there that are not Agile, that can benefit many of the Agile teams that you guys are part of. So, we're going to look at 4 things. 4 very small-ish concrete practices. So what's the next action? A/B testing, paper prototyping, and current reality tree. And they come from, each of them comes from a bigger thing. So getting things done, or lean startup, interaction design, or theory of constraints. And this is just, each of those is a tip of the iceberg of what's in the discipline that it comes from. And these 4 disciplines are just 4 of probably hundreds that I know a few of, and in this room we probably know a few more. Did anybody do this thing? Did anyone ask people what other books besides Agile they've been reading, or classes they've gone to? What did you guys hear? Yeah. GTD, cool.
I didn't read the book, but one of my coworkers is doing session every week on the GTD, so you can improve how you organize best your task.
So your coworker's gotten a lot of value out of GTD. Yeah. Sweet. And sharing that. Excellent. And then back there.
What I heard was Belvin.
Sorry?
I may be saying this wrong. Belvin.
Belvin, cool.
An assessment tool that categorizes people into different styles of getting things done.
Excellent. What else? Making things happen. Cool. Earlier today, the mindset thing, right? That we all, or many of us, heard at the keynote. It's a completely different thing outside of Agile that is very pertinent. Anyone else? Outliers, absolutely. There's a lot of really good stuff in many of his books. So outliers.
All right, there's a book called Thrive by Daniel Pink. Very, very good. In the motivation arena, there's so much absolute garbage that you get something that's actually grounded and makes sense based on good solid evidence.
Cool. So Drive by Daniel Pink. Excellent. And obviously, this is, again, the tip of the iceberg. If we spent more time in this room, you'd uncover many, many, many good places. So I encourage you to keep doing that after this session. So we're going to just touch on each of these briefly, and the idea is to just whet your appetite, give you an idea of what the concrete practice is, give you some sources on where to go to get more information, and potentially get you interested in the larger discipline. So the first thing is getting things done. Getting things done, in this crowd, I'd explain it as Scrum for one person. That's kind of how I see it, coming from a Scrum background. It's basically, how do I as an individual get stuff done? One of the core things that David Allen emphasizes is getting stuff out of your mental RAM. So his model is that all of us have all this stuff that we're trying to remember all the time. So as an example, I did an inventory of stuff that was in my head this morning, and I have a GTD system, so I looked at that as well. But I'm supposed to blog about the lab that I'm part of. I want to add some South Park avatars to our Kanban board. I need to send in a bio for a conference, schedule a weekend with my wife, just a bunch of stuff, right? This is all in my head. If it's only in my head, then when I'm giving this session to you guys, then part of me, like a little part of my brain is still thinking about all this stuff, and I can't be present here. And I'm holding that stress all the time. So he talks about clearing your mental RAM, and we're going to do a really quick exercise with this so that we can get to what's the next action. So for every table, if I get one person from each table to stand up and get some stuff to write on. We have some index cards, stickies, and some markers. You just come up and grab stuff, then go back to your table, and everybody is going to just spend a couple minutes writing down stuff that's on their mind. Oh, it's enough. There's also these. Yeah, take a bag.
One is enough for the table?
If it works for your table, I'm not sure if it has enough markers. Just make sure. So just brainstorm what's in your head. In a second, you're going to show this list to someone, so keep that in mind when you're writing it down. But you guys have 2 minutes, so just a brain dump. Write down all the things that you have to do. Like, right. As many as you can write in 2 minutes. There you go. So write down all the things that you have to do. And in a second, you're going to share this list with someone else. It's nothing too personal. All the stuff that's taking up space in your head. So 1 more minute. Okay, pencils, markers down. Just out of curiosity, how many things did you guys get? 5, 7, 5, 4, 6. If you did this for another 10 minutes, how many do you think you guys would come up with? Right. So that's kind of the point. All of those things are in your head and taking up space and keeping you from being completely present and doing those things among, being with your family or whatever else you do. So David Allen talks about 2 competencies, and he says that you want to try to become black belts in these 2 things. One is, what does done look like? So you could go down your list, and for each thing you could ask yourself first, what does done look like? Which sounds a lot like what in Agile? Sorry, somebody. Anything? Yeah, the definition of done, for sure, and also acceptance criteria and all of that stuff. So that's kind of an Agile idea. And then the second question is, what's the next action, right? So to give you an example, for these things, blog about the Nordstrom Innovation Lab. That's kind of a big, scary thing. I don't really like writing all that much. So the next action for me is not to write the blog. It's probably to write an outline, because that's a little bit less scary. And that's a small thing that I could probably do in, 10 minutes. Add South Park avatars to our Kanban board. I'm not actually there. Probably the thing to do is to just take a card and put that onto our Kanban board to write South Park characters, because it involves other people, right? So that's the next thing for me. Sending in a bio, I have one, I have to look it up, so I have to find the bio. That's the next action for me there. And maybe for some of these things, it's the next action, like the whole thing it's so small that the whole thing is the next action. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So, the next thing is just take a couple minutes and find a pair or a trio and just go down your list and come up with next actions, just so you kind of get the feel for what this feels like. Yeah? So you have 2 minutes. Actually, 3. $3.50. 31. All right. So, if I can get people's attentions again, so hands, something. So that was really quick intro to GTD. Question is, how is this relevant? So, you tell me. How might this be relevant to your jobs as software professionals?
Just like helps you organize. You don't spend your whole day just having your mind like bogged down with all the stuff you have to do.
Right.
Because right now, like I'm not going to spend the rest of this talk thinking about all these things. It's like it's totally relevant to work.
So as a software professional or whatever you do, you have stuff that you do. So as an individual, it might help you actually concentrate on what you need to do, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
Identify where you are, but looking at my list, it was all things that small, very small, but others, really things further up the street. So what kind of focus do you have?
Right. So actually, by taking a step out of your head, you can look at it and see, make sure that your focus is where you want it to be. If it's on today or tomorrow or next week or next year or 5 years from now. Absolutely. Anyone else?
Break it down to small tasks, and then you can see what's going on instead of falling on the brain.
Right. So breaking down small tasks, which did you mention like TDD, red, green, or just breaking down small tasks?
Just break it out, get it out there. I think it's
right.
Part of the sort of big successful thing in case you don't really have the next step. You end up sometimes not doing something, but you're looking for a big chunk of time to get that big thing. And you end up actually wasting a lot of time. There's a little bit of time not being used, but a little bit of things that are actually got to be done. I think this is there's a whole concept of use and finding that
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely this is a strategy for time management, and it shows you a way of like taking big things and just breaking it down. I mean, it doesn't tell you how. It just says, hey, do that, and give yourself permission to do that. One place specifically, as a developer, I pair program as the pair that's not driving. I constantly feel like it's my job to ask my pair, what's the next action? We have this story. It's kind of big and fussy. It's kind of exactly what you said. It's this big thing. What's the next single thing that we're going to do? And that gives us as a pair focus. But absolutely, it's applicable as an individual too. So there's a lot more. There's a ton more about GTD. It's really cool. I encourage you guys to find out more about it. There's one thing here. Personal Kanban is because you guys know a little bit about Lean and Agile. That might be interesting as well. It's kind of a much smaller competitor to GTD, but they talk about using some of the tools that you might use in Lean and Kanban in conjunction with it. So read more about it. Next up is A/B testing and Lean Startup. So I have a question. How do you guys in your software teams decide what features to build or what feature to build next?
Value and cost.
So use value and cost.
Yeah.
How do you get the value and the cost of a feature?
Some of them are clear, some of them are not clear.
Okay, so sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not, but a lot of times you just guess. Okay, so yeah, that sounds like what most people are doing for sure. What else do people do? The cost is a little bit more obvious because you're estimating, right? Value is that makes sense to me. Like you want to use value, but how do you get that? Right. Right. So that's the Scrum answer is you go to the product owner, and the product owner has expectations. They prioritize. And my question, which is like that's the right Agile answer, right? But how does the product owner decide what the next feature is, right? Yeah. Sorry, say that again. Right. So you actually go to the customer and ask them what they want, and they'll tell you and then you listen to what they say. So these are all good answers. How do you know when you're wrong? How do you know that the value that you thought you were going to get, how do you know that you don't get it? How do you know that your product owner didn't make a bad decision? How do you know that your customer didn't say they want something and then when they actually get it, they don't use it?
Oh, it's complicated. Sometimes, you think that there's a value for this feature and then within 2 weeks the value is gone. And, you already have the code and everything is great, but there's no value. So it depends.
Right.
Yeah, at the end of the day, let's call it situation, experience, whatever. We already know that you're right or wrong.
So you're saying that at the end of the sprint, you know if you're right or wrong as far as like...
And the shorter the sprint is, the sooner you know.
Sure. That may work in some cases. I would argue a lot of the time you won't actually know. Like there was a study that people quote a lot about the Standish group, like only 75% of features in production are actually used. So like something like 25% of features on average are just never used, complete waste, right? So those features, somebody thought they were a good idea, good enough to actually release all the way to production, and they just don't get used. So A/B testing is not the answer, but it's an answer to that. It's a strategy for addressing that. So an A/B test tries to be more scientific. You still have to guess. You still have to come up with, I think that this is a better idea than what we currently have. But A/B test gives you a way to validate that guess. So in an A/B test, you might say, let's look at an example really quick. Here in this example, this is a wiki job. It's a website where you can, do reasoning tests and stuff. But basically, they made a guess that if they put testimonials on the homepage, that they would get better results. And so what they did is they put testimonials on the homepage and showed the homepage with testimonials to 50% of the people who hit the site. And for the other 50%, they showed the original homepage. And then they just measured, like, how did it perform? That's half the answer. The other half of the answer is you have to know what better means, right? Like, if I say that this performed better. Like, how do I know? What am I measuring? So in this case, they were measuring signups, I believe. So there's that big sign up button. Like, how many times do people click sign up? So in Lean Startup, that's called a conversion. So you convert visitors to registered users. You might convert registered users to a paying user, and that's going to vary by your site. But in this example, I believe the version B got 34% more hits. And that's not necessarily obvious, although maybe it was, but in this case it's validated. You actually know that the change that you made actually is good. So it's not that hard to do this. It's pretty simple technically. The hard thing is that most people think that their intuition is better than it is. So what I wanted to do was convince you that your intuition was not as good as you thought it was. So here's a quiz. So we saw this one. This is a music download service. And I believe, well, a bunch of changes got made here. So it's maybe not quite as clean of a test, but on the top one, on the A, there's a picture of an actual person. The navigation's a little bit different. So on this one, I'm going to ask, which one do you think performed better? And in this case, performed better is, this is an actual installer. So you actually download it onto your computer and you see the screen, and it takes a second while it installs the software. So they were measuring people that they hit cancel before it's done. So just in a second, shout it out. So which do you guys think performed better, A or B? Okay, so in this case, you were right. A reduced bounces, which is the point, by 12%, increased ultimate revenue per visitor by 7%. This is a residential solar company. All they did was they changed the text on their button. So I don't know if you can see. Here it's click for your solar consultation, click here to get started, get a no obligation quote now. So which do you think performed better? Right, so it's B in this case, and it's 74%. So that's pretty significant. And you might think you know why that is, and maybe you do, maybe you don't, but it's really nice to know that it's performing better, yeah? Like if it's your money. This is a hotel. The only difference is they put a little help thing on the left side. They didn't change anything else. So A or B, which do you think? Okay, so some disagreement. So the one with the help performed a little bit better. It got a 9.2 lift in completed hotel bookings, which was conversion for them. Sorry? I don't know. I think if they had 1,000 people going through here, 9.2% probably is. There's actually a lot of tools for A/B testing that actually take statistical significance into account. This is a really simple, this is on someone's blog. So I'm on Twitter as a link versus you should follow me on Twitter here. And here's the link. Which do you guys think performed better? So in this case, I believe it's B by 173%. So interesting. A contact button. The first contact button has a face, the second one has an icon, A or B. It's A by double. So in this case, the buttons are exactly the same. The difference is the color. It's B by, let's see, 34%. And that's the only difference, just the color. And you know, maybe this isn't enough information. Maybe this was on a page and the page's colors had something to do with it. So maybe context is important, but that's why you test it in context. So, and let's do one more. So these two free email updates, and this is on, I think, someone's blog. So they're trying to get people to sign up. So conversion for them is signing up for their email, and there's probably other steps in conversion. I don't know if you guys can see. So get free email updates, join 14,752 others and get free updates on the left, and then just get email updates. It's free on the right. A or B? It's B. It's yeah. So it was 1% versus 2%. So it was double. And maybe that's not statistically significant. I'm not sure. So things to keep in mind. What does conversion mean for you? It's always going to be different. How are you going to measure it? What could you change that might affect conversion? So the measuring, this part is trying to be more of a science, but let's come up with something creative, that's still art. So like do ideation and stuff for that. What's your expected outcome? And to do it often, a lot. You can have several of these in play at the same time on sites. Startups have gotten really good at this because when they don't do this type of stuff, they die. Big companies are still trying to learn that this is actually really good stuff that they should also be doing and can give them a head up on their competition. Other things, run A and B in parallel. You could do one version this week and another version the next week, but then there's other factors, like maybe you're testing on the weekend versus the week, or the first week of the month versus the second week of the month, or there's a conference going on. There's a million things that could happen, so in parallel reduces a lot of that stuff and makes it a little bit more of a controlled experiment. Run the test for the right amount of time, and it gets to your statistical significance, and depending on the traffic going into your site and how many people are converting, that's going to be different. And if you do too long, you're basically throwing away money, right? Because the thing that's not performing as well is live for longer than it needs to be. Define the test and think, right? Like this is not a license to not think. So that's it. There's a lot more to read. There's a bunch of tools. Google has a free one. There's a bunch of things. There's a bunch of excitement actually about Lean Startup, and a lot more is going on there as well. So I invite you to look at that. Any questions on that before we go on? Cool. Paper prototyping. So for this, I need a volunteer. So what we're going to do, so paper prototype, who here has done paper prototyping? Excellent. Okay, so actually a couple people. Good. So paper prototyping comes from interaction design. And who here has used a wireframe before or seen a wireframe? Okay, so many, if not most of us. So that kind of looks a little bit like a wireframe, except it's probably drawn by hand. A paper prototype looks like a wireframe, but you use it differently, and it's very different because of that. So I could tell you more about it, but I want to just show you. So what I need is a volunteer that's going to be the subject of a paper prototyping session. And come on up. Yeah, a hand for our volunteer. And Craig, if you want to, we have a camera person. So you can, actually, I'm sitting in your seat. Yeah, you're going to sit down on the chair if you would. This is going to be so awesome. Here you go. Is that, no, it was working.
Oh, it's,
Yeah, just, it's a little wonky. You have a seat over there. Oh. Yeah, yeah, just on the paper. Maybe however that works. And you, what's your name?
Nick.
Nick. Here you go. If you could try to talk in the microphone.
Test. Check 1, 2. No.
Try louder.
Check 1, 2.
No? Is there an on?
Is there a button? There's a button. Hello.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so I'm going to, so basically this is something you might do with real users, hopefully. And I've asked Nick to come in and to try out this new design for this website that we have. And so, Nick, I'm going to give you a scenario to kind of give you some motivation. You were talking to a friend and they told you, hey, there's this cool thing I'm doing called swing dancing. It's a lot of fun, and there's this website that you can find classes for it on. So they gave you a link to this, you typed it in, teachstreet.com, and it brought you here. So this is your mouse.
Okay.
And you want to find classes about swing dancing. So this is what you see. What do you do?
Is this all? Okay, this is all one thing.
Yeah, it's all one thing.
Well, I'll probably start with I'm a student.
Okay. So if you click I'm a student, well, first off, what do you expect to happen?
I'm expecting information possibly about either returning or new students. So.
Huh, interesting. So I might note that down because that's probably not what we're going to find. So you get this.
Okay.
And actually, let's see that for a second. Where are you from?
Okay.
Okay, so actually, you actually see that, Vancouver, and maybe here again. There you go. Now what do you do?
I'm gonna zoom right. I'm gonna like swing dance in here and then search.
Yeah, sure, write it right there.
Dance in here.
Nick's doing a really good job of talking out loud as he goes, which is part of this, right?
And then I'm gonna click search.
Okay, so when you click search, that goes away. Oops. And you see this. Search results for swing dance.
Mm-hmm. So I'm a bit of a budget right now, so I'm going to try one, because I'm not going to commit to it, so I'm going to try to see if that's a link. I don't know if it is, but something here will probably be clickable, so I'm going to click on one of these.
So you're unclear on what's the link, but you'll probably click on this first, you think?
Yeah, I'll probably click on this, because theoretically, like this, yeah, this is I want one session, $50. Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool. And what do you expect to see when you click on that?
Probably take me to a shopping cart at that point.
Interesting. Well, so this is what you're actually going to see.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, close enough. Yes, I get some more details, and then I'll say, cool.
Enroll. Okay. So then you'd see this. You're enrolling in, and oops. Should probably say something like swing, right?
Can we write my Visa card number too here?
Yeah, please, if you would. So, at this point, what do you think? Is this what you expected?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I clicked enroll. I was looking, drilling down to the class, and in reality, I'd probably say, nah, not swing class. I don't want to do swing dance. That sounds kind of stupid.
Right.
But then maybe I'll do something else, like house dancing or something.
Right.
But yeah, this seems to be matching my expectations.
Okay, and so go ahead and like put in, I don't know, don't put anything sensitive in there, but and just
I'll just put in Nick, and then Chrome will autocomplete the form for me.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
So I'll click next.
Cool. And so you just click next from there.
I'll just click next. Yeah.
So at this point, I might note a few things, like he didn't really see or I don't think he saw the notes for teacher, and he definitely didn't fill that in.
No.
And he wanted to have a really quick experience. And then from there, you come back to here. Is that what you expected?
I think I want a receipt. I think I want to see something, like not indicated, a confirmation, say, hey, you got this, here's a reminder of the date, here's a confirmation number.
Could you maybe draw that for me? Or just like the important parts?
I think it would actually look a lot like that one, but somewhere maybe.
Maybe it was this one.
Yeah, kind of basically it was more like that, but just kind of a detailed, like a print-friendly version of this, including the map, including the and then my confirmation number, my details, including the fact that probably another reminder of notes for teacher, but then empty. So I'll draw things like, oh, no notes not available or something, and then probably maybe even a print button. That so details.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Well, excellent. That was super helpful. Thanks so much. Yeah. Give Nick a hand. Thank you. So while I hook this up, I want you guys to be thinking about what you just saw, because in a second I'm going to ask you to explain paper prototyping to me. So yeah, tell me about paper prototyping.
This is a good idea of how someone is whatever the product is, and it doesn't really let you make expectations for what they would expect when you put something. You know right away, like, oh, this is what I kind of thought you would want, but actually you expect it to be, something of what you just bought or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, so quick wave testing, and it lets you actually validate your expectations about interaction with the site, for sure.
Also adjust based on what people do. Like if you actually create a mock-up or those comments or just like some website, when they click it, that's what happens. That's what you hear, where it's actually, I think that's the link. You're like, sure, of course it's the link. If you hear, where something different, you can react to that and just adjust it.
For sure. So one of the most powerful things about this style of paper prototyping is it's so lo-fi that we can actually change it in the middle of a paper prototyping session, and definitely in between sessions, right? The receipt that you talked about, perhaps between you and the next session, we might just mock it up and see how people reacted to it. What we understand it might be. I think you had something.
Sometimes usability testing, but before you've done all the design and having the community code and everything like that, you could give them a paper. You've got your usability testing done before.
Absolutely. So it's a super low cost and early way to do usability testing. So I mentioned, or I think Craig mentioned that I work with the Innovation Lab. So what we do is we do entire projects in a week. So, and we're lucky, we have a designer, we have a UX person on hand. So what we tend to do is we come together and kind of brainstorm, and then oftentimes they'll go off and they'll do some of this stuff at the same point that we start doing some plumbing. So they're actually, like, day 2, they're usability testing paper, and we're getting information, and they're changing designs because their assumptions were off, right? Like when we actually talk to real users. What else?
Well, basically this only represents one behavioral pattern, right? So it's very subjective how you select users, how many, and what type of users.
Right. So this is very, yeah, so there's definitely some art/science around how many users, what type of users, do they actually represent the users that you're trying to represent. The last thing, A/B testing, that tends to, that's a quantitative approach, right? You could, if you were a big website, you could have 100,000 users. Facebook actually does a lot of A/B testing, right? So they could have 100,000 users test a feature and get quantitative results of exactly the people that are currently using their site. With this, you get qualitative results, and you can get a lot more out of them, but of a much smaller number of people.
Because I was following comments, and then mine would have been different.
Right. So it's important to keep that in mind. I think that's the lesson to take out of your point. Like, don't fool yourself into thinking that this is like the absolute truth for everybody.
By doing it in pencil, is getting it out of the technical environment. You find that like actually typing something up for you with other standard icons and too much. You go too much. If you do it or influencing somehow, is there a reason for it being based on pencil?
Sure. Well, actually, most of this is marker, although some of it is pencil. Yeah, so it depends on who you ask. I've heard many people say that the reason is so that the user can actually just mark on it. Nick was actually happy to mess up some of these, right? If these were nice and beautiful and it looked like we'd actually spent any time on them, he probably would have been less likely to do that. People find that the type of feedback that you get on designs when they look ugly is much deeper, right? As opposed to just like polishy kind of stuff. So if you're really trying to look for the interaction, this might be a good place to go. That said, a lot of times, it's a website that's already around or a product that's already around, and you're trying to test, well, what am I going to do from there? Maybe you start with just screenshots, and you can do this on top of it or something else. So, what else? Sure. I've definitely found that you can show wireframes to people, but they don't really get, especially if they're less technical, they can't put them together in their head so that it feels real. And this is probably a lot rougher than most wireframes. I'm not a designer, and I did these. So, but they can actually see the interaction. They can actually touch and feel and have it actually react, right? So, absolutely. One thing that may not have been, one thing that it's important to note, there's when people talk about paper prototyping, there's 4 roles. There's facilitator and subject. Those are kind of obvious, right? Like I was acting as a facilitator. Nick was the subject. There's also computer. So somebody acts as the computer. This is also called Wizard of Oz prototyping, because it's kind of like pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, right? So that person is the computer there. And I was acting as both facilitator and computer. And you might not want to, especially as you start out. It's definitely, it's less frenetic if one person's asking questions and another person is kind of driving that. And there's a 4th role, and that role is probably the most important, and that's the person taking notes. I find that if you have the same person facilitating, being the computer, and taking notes all at the same time, you get less notes and things get kind of dropped. So, and you can have multiple people taking notes. One thing some of my usability friends do is they'll have a session like this where you have facilitator and the subject, and behind them they'll have some note takers so that the person doesn't feel like they're kind of being attacked by a panel or something.
How effectively have you tried doing video taping and doing those
I haven't played, I mean, I do this a lot. I haven't tried that variant of it. I know.
Why would you do that? Because maybe so good.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of people actually do videotaping, but I haven't actually taken those 2 things and do it together. I've done some videotaping. The UX person in our team currently, just that's not her style, so she doesn't videotape. And I haven't tried taking notes afterwards. That might work just fine.
How many versions or iterations of this would you do before?
I think it completely depends on your context. But for my current team, like the entire dev cycle is a week. So we start coding before this, and then when we get results, we totally change what we're doing, change direction, and we keep doing it. Eventually, the usability tests move from paper to real software, and we keep doing that and keep iterating. So I would just pay attention. Anything else? Yes. I think different people do it differently. I hear more and more teams that do it on a regular cadence, right? So there's, I forget the name. There's one team that does five users every Friday, something like that. So every Friday, 5 people come in, and just every single Friday, they don't know what they're going to test before the 5 people come in, but every Friday people come in and give them feedback on whatever they have. And because of that, it just becomes a normal thing and not special, and it seems like a really good way to do it. And there's other teams that do similar things. So that seems like the best idea for me. The way we do it is it's kind of on-demand type thing, but we're kind of a weird case at the Innovation Lab. Any other observations or questions? Yes? Absolutely. Absolutely. So just to echo that, acceptance criteria up front is really good. And because it's so concrete, your customer can actually see what they're agreeing to and what is going to get built. Cool. And the other side of that, I would say as a developer, because that's a hat I often wear, I love this, right? Like this is so much more helpful than a wireframe because I can see how it actually works. Cool. So there's a lot more to read, like everywhere else. There's a book. A lot of people are doing this and other things. Interaction design is actually, it's a really cool field that has all the, I mean, it's like Agile, right? This huge explosion and tons of new techniques and practices. This was kind of the one that we used the most a couple months ago. These days, Design Charrette is something that I would suggest you guys look into. And there's probably hundreds of other things in there. Okay, the next thing and last thing is called current reality tree. So who is familiar with theory of constraints? A couple of people, a few people, cool. So theory of constraints is a simplified version as I understand it. And again, like all of these things, I'm not a master of these things. All of these things are, I've started learning about. I've used them all in anger a few times, some more than others, and with good results in general. But and that's the point. That's the point of this talk. So theory of constraints, as I understand it, it talks about in any system, there's always one constraint, right? If the goal of the system is to produce software at a fast rate, or to make a lot of money, or whatever the goal is, there's always exactly one thing that's slowing the system down from achieving that goal. It goes on to say that usually that thing is causing many of the other symptoms that you see that are problems in the organization. And it follows from that if you do anything, make any change to that system besides, or that doesn't address the core problem, the root cause of that system, then you're kind of wasting your time. What you're going to see is you're going to see things that, like you might see this change get made, but it doesn't actually change the whole system. You don't actually get the improvements that you expect. You don't actually affect your bottom line, like the goal of the entire system, because something else is the thing that, by definition, is slowing it down. Does that kind of make sense? So basically, it's a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, is kind of the thing, but applied to a much larger scale. I have a sledgehammer here, because I think of current reality tree as a bit of the sledgehammer. It's a root cause analysis tool from theory of constraints. Because if you believe that the constraint is like the single most important thing, then you need some good tools to find what that constraint is. So current reality tree is that tool. Is anybody familiar with other root cause analysis tools?
Fishbone diagram.
Fishbone, for sure. Pareto analysis, yes. Yep, 5 whys. There's a few others too. But this one is the one from theory of constraints. And you'll see what it looks like in a second. Yeah, before I go on, so just the story, you want to be careful with root cause analysis tools, just because you can quickly get to some really serious stuff. There was a client I had a while back that I was with them for 4 months, and by the end of the 4 months, I hadn't really had the impact that I had wanted to have. I changed a lot of things. I'd addressed a lot of things that they had wanted addressed, but they weren't delivering software much different than they were before. And about that time, I came across theory of constraints, and this sounded like a classic case of I wasn't addressing the root cause of the problem. So we actually all got together. We did a retrospective that was just about this. Got 40 people in a room, and we kicked out the managers because safety was a concern. And we dug into root cause. And 2 hours later, people were exhausted, and we actually had some pretty serious root causes. A lot of them had to do with management, people, a little bit afraid of their jobs getting lost, and then we couldn't do anything with it, right? Because safety was a concern, which was up there. The team was actually afraid of showing that to their managers. So just be careful. It's a really powerful tool, and you want to treat it with respect. So I'll give you an example. The syntax is very simple. So a problem or an issue, undesirable symptom, is that the car doesn't start. So why doesn't the car start? Well, the car doesn't start because the battery is dead. So that denotes because the battery is dead, the car doesn't start relationship. There's also sometimes a relationship where because A is true and B is true, C is true. So actually, the car didn't start because both the battery is dead and we have no spare battery. If we had a spare battery, we could switch it and the car would start. If the battery was not dead, then we'd just be fine. That makes sense? And I'm going to show you guys an example too. So you might start with a couple undesirable symptoms. So can you guys see this? I'll read it. Hopefully it'll be okay. These will all get posted later, so you'll have them for later. So the release is risky to install, and installing takes more than half an hour. So this is pretty typical, right? Like a lot of people are talking about continuous delivery. So why is the release risky to install? Well, the admins don't understand the release, right? Why else is the release risky to install? It involves many systems, right? And actually, because it involves many systems, it takes longer than half an hour to release, to install. And why else does it take longer than half an hour to install? Well, there's a lot of manual steps. And why are there a lot of manual steps? And because developers are not motivated to script. And also because developers can't script. Why are they not motivated to script? Well, because they're not involved in maintenance. And actually, they can't script also because they're not involved in maintenance. So go back to the other side. Why don't the admins understand? The admins are not involved in development. So that's interesting. You kind of start seeing a pattern here. So why is it that the admins are not involved in development? Well, development and operations are separated. So in this one, it's nice and neat, and everything resolves to kind of one root cause. In practice, getting it to be kind of this nice and neat it takes a while. But I have done this a few times now with clients, and we get to, even when it's not quite this nice and neat, we get some really, really good insights. And I think that's the point of the tool. Does that make sense so far? Any questions so far? Okay, so with the rest of the time, what I wanted to do was take a look at this, the promise of Agile. So in thinking about current reality tree, Agile is supposed to give you passionate customers, product teams trust management, management trust product teams. You're supposed to have cross-functional teams. You're supposed to have happy developers, self-organizing teams, short delivery cycles, work is taken, not assigned, customer focus, and sustainable pace. All of these great things, right? Who has all of those things? Anyone? Sweet. You will not be a subject of the next thing. And we should talk later. So it's hard to get here. And so what you might do is you might do some sort of root cause analysis around one or more of these things. So what I would like people to do, I have this printed up so that in case you can't see it. And if each table wants to have one person that feels comfortable sharing this type of stuff with the rest of their table, we're going to just do a current reality tree. And I'll just put that back on the thing. How does that sound to you guys? And we don't have to, I mean, obviously you have to talk about stuff that you're comfortable sharing with other people at the conference. And we can do it like the whole table or a couple by table, just whatever makes sense for you guys. Yeah? You guys are pretty quiet. It's last session, huh? So get up. If you don't have stickies, grab some stickies, grab some markers. I'll pass out these papers. And if one person just wants to volunteer, or if you want to do two per table, either way, start doing a current reality tree. A good way to do it is one issue per sticky. And yeah. You?
Okay. Sorry.
Makes sense?
Instructions.
Oh, let me kill this. Okay. We're going to do one more thing, and then we're going to call it a day. So, has anyone been in a science fair? Actually, do you guys do science fairs in Canada? Yeah? Okay, so who's ever been in a school science fair? That's it? Really? Who doesn't know what a science fair is? Okay, so in case anyone just... I don't know. There's people from different countries here. So science fair is in school, like you do a science project and then you have a little display board. People come by and they see what you did and you kind of explain it to them, and then they rank you and you get like prizes and ribbons and stuff. So that's interesting in our context because it's a good way to just share information in kind of an organic way. So that's what we're going to do right now. So each table has a project that they just did. And I'm going to ask one person from each table to stay there, and you're going to explain what you guys did to everybody else. And we'll do that for like, I don't know, a few minutes, and then we'll swap out so somebody else, actually if somebody else wants to just kind of relieve that person at some point so that person can go around and look at all the other projects, then that'll work out well. Does that make sense? So you're basically just going to go to the other tables and see what what other current reality trees look like. Yeah? Any questions? Okay, do it. Okay, so we're getting close to time, so people can sit back down one more time and we'll just do a quick debrief. So, I'm going to do it. Hands, if you can hear me. So, what did you guys see? They looked very different to me. So, what did you guys see? What did you guys learn?
I'll give my comments. I think we often didn't have that much complexity in the root causes. So it wasn't maybe as revealing as it would have been if it had a more complex situation. It starts to get up to stuff that's like, well, yeah, it's pretty obvious. We all know this pattern. But it comes back to misaligned goals and failure to communicate, right? So, I think I can see how it has to be applied to the right kind of problem. And if you didn't do that, you probably should stop using it. So I think it's just boundaries around certain complexity of problems, certain uncertainty there.
Sure. So I'm hearing that context is important. So always context is important. Yeah, I mean, it's a tool for figuring out what your constraint is. If you know what it is, then you probably don't need a tool to figure out what it is. Although I would ask if this is an issue that you have and you know about, why you still have it. So that might be something to think about.
Just a comment on that. There's a follow-on technique called reality tree where you think about what your dimension is going to be, and having your current reality tree mapped out allows you to use where what the effect is, identify what are some of the positive feedback loops you might be separate, etc. So you see this as a starting.
Yeah. Right.
Yep. Absolutely. So some great resources around that. Goldratt is the guy behind theory of constraints, and so this is like the first tool, and then of course like what you do with it. The future reality tree, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Future reality tree, and then there's lots of other stuff around that. All great to talk about.
It's not left the successor to the goal.
Yeah. So I will add the book that Owen was talking about because I haven't read it, but apparently it's a better resource than the ones up here. So thank you, Owen. What else did you guys see? What else did you learn when you were doing yours?
Well, I think we're right about this being like very powerful tool and testing conversations but it's nice that we didn't have our mentions at these people.
So I heard in your case it seemed like it was a powerful tool. You were surprised and covered some things that you were surprised about and some things that you may not have been comfortable revealing to your managers.
And it's going to be interesting and maybe very useful to do that when the customers on site.
Yeah.
With them.
I might encourage you guys to, the next time you do it, bring your managers in and do it in front of them so you go only as far as you're comfortable revealing to them. Because it won't be all the way up, but it'll be high enough that you can start the process, right? If it seems like a good fit for you guys. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Yes. It's a lot of energy asking why. Why is it really, like, of all the W questions, like why is like the most abrasive? Like why this? It feels almost like an attack. So be careful of that. The two streams. Oh, yes. And one thing I should note, I have some experience in this. I haven't done this like 1,000 times. But when I've done it, it's never this clean, right? Like it diverges a bit more. It takes a few revs, many people. There you go. Maybe the end of the day is the right time to do it then. What else? What did you guys think of the science fair? As a tool in and of itself, like apart from current reality training.
After going through the exercise yourself, see what results
Yeah.
it gives yourself and you look around.
Yeah, good to see like how other people did it. Science fair, you can use that, or companies use that. They actually, a couple places I've seen it, like a hackathon, right? Like you might give your devs a day or a week to just hack and come up with good ideas. And then a science fair is a good way for everybody to see what everybody else created, right? And it's kind of a really cool, organic way of doing that. Anything else? Well, I think that's all I have. There's stuff here. This will get uploaded. I'll add that book. Owen, thank you. And thank you so much for your attention. Cheers.